Hi everybody, TJ Mac Vintage Cards and Nostalgia here. When I was growing up, Kmart was the main department store in Niagara Falls. My mom would go there for most things we needed for the house, besides food. This included my school supplies, and on special occasions, I'd even get some toys. I have fond childhood memories of running to the toy aisle to look at G.I. Joe, Star Wars, and these Mego pocket superhero figures as my mom would go off and do her shopping. This seems crazy in today's world where we don't let our kids out of our sight for more than a minute. Now, back in the late 70s, early 80s, Kmart was the second largest retailer in the United States with over 2,000 stores, trailing only Sears. Now, eventually that would change as Walmart began expanding into the suburbs and taking over the market share. As of today, there are over 4,600 Walmarts in the United States, compared to just 12 Kmarts and 13 Sears. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. For those of us who are in our late 40s and well into our 50s, we are bound to recall the collaboration between Topps and Kmart that produced a 44-card box set featuring MVPs from 1962 to 1981 depicted on their Topps cards. You might ask, why 1962? Well, that was the year the very first Kmart store opened in Garden City, Michigan. Kmart wanted to use this set to celebrate their 20th anniversary. I remember going to my local Kmart when the sets came out and seeing a display table with box after box of these sets, sporting the red, white, and blue Kmart colors that you see here. This is a depiction of the box. And you can see their logo featuring the large red K emblazoned on the front. Now the sets are about the size of a deck of playing cards, and they were made extra special because in the front you see this image of a gold plate with the words Topps Limited Edition. Now, of course, in the collector's world, limited edition is another way of saying something that is going to go down in value over time. To put it in perspective, in 1982, Kmart had over 2,000 stores, so it was likely there were over 500,000 to 1 million of these sets produced. Not exactly a limited edition. I probably didn't exactly know what was inside the box, but I knew they were baseball cards and I wanted them. I asked my mom for one and she said yes. And I remember coming home and sitting at the kitchen table as I thumbed through the cards and saw names like Yastrzemski and Killebrew and Munson mixed in with players that I never heard of, like Boyer, Burroughs, and Versalles. I looked at these cards dozens and dozens of times over the next several months, as it was my first exposure to many of the different Topps sets. There were 3 cards in particular that stuck out to me from this set. One was the 1962 Topps Mickey Mantle with a striking faux wood border. Now, Doug at the channel Video Guy 316, he just did a wonderful video on that card and how the Kmart set inspired him to buy one. I'm going to put a link to that video down below, and I'd ask that you check it out. Now, I'll show my mantle in a future video when I profile my 1962 Topps cards. I haven't shown my mantle yet on my channel. And the second card that resonated with me from this set is one that I do not have yet, but will share once I acquire it. But the third card is one that I did get in last week. This beautiful 1971 Topps second year card of Vida Blue. And here he is next to a printout of what the Kmart card would have looked like from that set. Now, I knew very little about Vida Blue beyond that he was a pitcher for the Giants, but for whatever reason, this card captivated an 8-year-old me. First of all, you have the black borders which stand out, but it was this image of a smiling blue with his left hand raised and his two fingers extended that drew me in. As a kid, I thought he was giving the peace sign. Now I know that he was showing the grip of his famed two-seam fastball. You also have the striking, sleeveless uniform the A's wore back then with the white and the Kelly green. I liked his simple and easy-to-read signature too. And one of the details I picked up on as an adult collector is the MLB patch that was creatively placed on his jersey under the A. That patch was typically worn on the sleeves of the jerseys, but being the A's had a sleeveless jersey, they had to place it somewhere else. And this patch was worn by all the teams in 1969 to pay tribute to the 100th anniversary of baseball. So this shows that this picture of Blue was actually taken during his first year in the majors in 1969. Surprisingly, I never owned this card until now. For whatever reason, it just wasn't a priority. With part of my collecting focus moving more and more towards cards that conjure up nostalgic memories, I knew this is one I had to have. It's one of those cards that when I see it, I get a warm, happy feeling inside. The best kind of cards to have in your collection. Beyond sentiment, this card also captures an era that was before my time, but one I connected with nonetheless. I read an article by Mark Armour in Sabre that talked about Blue's rapid ascent to the top of the baseball world in 1971. It is not common for young pitchers to steal the headlines in a game that tends to focus on the great hitters, but like the Bird and Fernando and Dr. K before him, Vida Blue was a young phenom that was must-watch when he was on the mound. Now, after a less than impressive debut in 1969, he joined the A's again in September 1970 and threw a one-hitter and then a no-hitter in just 6 starts. So big things were expected from him in 1971. But I don't think many expected Vida to become one of the biggest stories in sports that year. By May, he was 10-1, including 5 shutouts. Armour wrote that following baseball in 1971 meant that you followed Vita Blue. All his game stories were highlighted in his hometown newspaper, and Armour lived 3,000 miles away from Oakland. He had several magazine covers, and Vida was even on the local nightly news. Vida Blue in 1971 was like Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa in 1998, like Roger Maris in 1961. A dominant daily sports story. The problem for him and other kids that year was that Vida was having this monster season, and there was still no 1971 Topps card as the calendar turned from May to June. Armour said that every month or so, Topps would release a checklist for the next series, and he would check to see if Vida was coming up, but the answer continued to be no. Meanwhile, Vida kept rolling along. He was selling out stadiums everywhere he went. He was selected to start the All-Star game on July 13th, and he even earned the win. As the season rolled on, Series 3 and Series 4 of 71 Topps came out, and still no Vida Blue. Imagine how annoyed kids must have felt at this point. It wasn't until the 5th series came out, probably in late July, early August, that Blue finally appeared in packs. Ironically, Armour never ended up getting the 71 Topps Blue card. Now, Vida ended up finishing the 71 season with a 24-8 record, a 1.92 ERA, with 301 strikeouts, winning the Cy Young Award and the MVP for a team that won its first divisional title. By the time 1972 rolled around, Blue was still popping up in many of the magazines, such as this 1972 Baseball Illustrated. There was much excitement in the air as the baseball world pondered what he would do for an encore. In this magazine, he was called the baddest dude of them all. His manager, Dick Williams, said his curveball was as good as Koufax and Herb Score. The article stated, the question one hears most often, is Vita Blue as good as Sandy Koufax? In a year or two, the question may be, was Sandy Koufax as good as Vida Blue? Well, we all know the answer now. Blue ended up holding out during the spring of 1972, and he didn't sign until a few weeks into the season. Of course, we know the owner was Charles Finley, who was known to be pretty tight with the purse strings. Blue ended up not having a great year, finishing 6-10 with a 2.80 ERA. He never had 200 strikeouts again, let alone 300, becoming the only major league pitcher to have a 300 strikeout season, but never a 200 strikeout season. Now, Blue had borderline Hall of Fame career with 209 wins, 6 All-Star teams, and 3 World Series titles. But he was angry at Finley, who he said took all of the fun out of the game for him. He also got involved with cocaine, which negatively impacted his career. This card will always have a special place in my collection, not only because of the joy it brought to me as an 8-year-old, but also because of the superstar he was, albeit for a short time. Now, this 1972 Sports Hero magazine from my personal collection is extra special to me now because I have the magazine's 3 biggest stars in hockey, football, and baseball going into 1972. You have the 71 Bobby Orr, 71 Joe Namath, and now this Vita Blue. These 3 cards capture an era that is no more. These cards capture an era I wish to remember. This is another piece to the puzzle that is my collection. That's all for this week. Have a great weekend. Until we talk again.